So first, there's the obligation to serve. You have to serve. Second is that a young lady's, and here's where I get off into a field. Um, God calls young men, and that's all you'll ever find in the Bible, by the way. God calls a young man. Now, when girls stand up and say, I'm called to full-time service, I don't say, sit down, get thee behind me, Satan. That's between them and God. I'm just saying, biblically speaking, God calls young men, and then God calls a young woman to a young man, and their purposes intertwine. The two become one. The man leads it, and the woman enables his leadership. But her primary role is to her husband first, and to her children, and then to whatever else after that. The Bible is very clear that a woman's primary obedience is to her husband, as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wife be subject to the husband and everything. And we've gotten a little afield where we think it's more important to pull women out of the home and into positions and away from children. And I got in trouble right off the bat on that. And I'm a pastor now, and I'm about as apolitical as I get. I'm in Toadsuck, Georgia, so it doesn't matter, what I say. But the greatest ministry my wife has is me. The second greatest ministry she has is our children, and that's it. And so we were the first year we went into ministry, we were both teaching. And she's an excellent teacher. And so when she was with child with Austin, we went to the pastor of the church and we said, hey, we're going to have to, have this baby, and Shannon's going to be at home to raise the baby. And I had made that clear when I went to work for him, but apparently memories can be short sometimes. And he said, okay, well, how long will she be out? And, thinking maybe she'll miss one school year because she was a real asset to the Christian school. And I said, I don't know, 18 years or so. That's if we don't have more children. And he played hardball with me. He's like, well, I don't know how you can live on one income like that. And I'm like, well, you hired me full time, but I had to go to heads over it because some people have the philosophy that it's more important what a woman does out there than what she does at home. And as far as I know, that's not biblical. And so a philosophy, if I want anything to trail, behind me, and I've seen it in our church, and, I've got young men who have gotten out of the whole, we've got to have two incomes, and gotten their wives at home, and now their children to be raised in a biblical model. And our problem is we get ministry sprawl, and we have to fill in all these different spots. And women, let's face it, women typically are more organized than men. And when it comes to teaching in the younger grades, you probably want one there rather than a man. And there's some things that God gives them an organizational ability that is awesome in the workforce out there. That ability to multitask the way that they can. And I got a little illustration I do sometimes where I talk about all that a woman does, and I've got her juggling chainsaws and lit candles and saw blades and all this sort of thing. And she's just doing it effortlessly and keeping all of it going. And then I'm like, and here I am as a man, my wife's doing all this, but if I ever cook a meal, she has to acknowledge the fact that I cook a meal. I'm juggling like one tennis ball, and I want her to be proud of me for doing it. And if I tried to cook a meal and keep an eye on the kids, something would burn or someone would get lost. And so they have this innate ability to multitask. And by the way, the Apostle Paul said it best. He said, this one thing I do. But they have the ability to multitask, and they have the ability to be, hyper organized. And those are coveted assets in any ministry. You want that. But the reason God gave them that primarily is to be that asset for their husband and to be that for their children. And so You know, I've had some uncomfortable positions in times when I'm laying this out, and I can lay it out biblically. But in ministry, you're always going to find out that there's going to be friction between practical and biblical, and you better choose biblical, because if you start hedging Bible in order to meet the practical needs of the ministry, well, in the ideal world, you know, this works or that works. I guess you can tell I'm passionate about this nonsense because I just go on and on. I don't want to fill up the airways with it, but if you start hedging Bible to fill the practical aspects of the ministry, and then you'll start saying like, well, you know, that works in an ideal setting. Well, no, that works in the biblical setting. And as far as I know, God blesses the biblical, not the practical. I don't know how practical many of the things people did in Hebrews 11, but they were all biblical and they're all faith. And all of it requires faith, because the natural man would say, well, if my wife and I both work, we have more income, and that's a better thing. And, you know, we can put the kid in the daycare at 6 months. And I don't know that God told a father to raise his children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That is his directive for the dad. And since two become one, that is the admonition to a parent. That is not something that we're to farm out. You can farm out trash collection, but don't farm out raising your children. Just sit in a swing in a daycare, you know, and they only get attention when they cry out and somebody else hears their first words and watches their first steps. And I really think we've hurt ourselves as a country, because obviously the meltdown of the family, and children don't understand love the way they should because they haven't experienced it from their mother. The mother is the person who forsakes everything that she could be. I mean, she starts out, you know, by having a child and misshaping her body terribly and going through all of that, and then all the sleepless nights, but it doesn't just end there. It's, yes, she could be doing something else, but she chooses to focus her energy on this child, and that child experiences love in an unmistakable fashion. And it's indelibly imprinted on them. They know the rest of their life what love looks like. And when they look at Calvary, they understand the same selflessness there. They understand that he who knew no sin became sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness. So it is, if I've left any mark, if I want to leave any mark, it's to hang on to the idea of traditional roles in marriage and family, and that doesn't conflict with serving God. You don't have to give one up. Now, you may have to take a stand, but, you know, we're independent Baptists. We're supposed to be good at that, right? And sometimes the stands aren't out there. Sometimes the stands are where you're working. And I've done it, and I think the Lord has blessed me for it. And I happen to marry really, really, like, way over my head. And that was, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm married way, way.